I predicted not that long ago that Batman 158, the return of Jim frickin' Lee on art on an ongoing series, at least temporarily, was going to be a big deal. I had some people in my own inner circle like Doc saying, Jim's not going to move the needle. It's going to do all right, but it won't do great. And it appears that it is doing great. In fact, DC are lauding the sales, and they don't do this very often because I don't think they have a lot of sales to laud, but they are very ecstatic that their orders, I think, have exceeded 400,000 thus far. And it's certainly something to champion and be excited about in comic books. We need big hits. We need people and things that bring people into comic book shops and reignite their interest in comic books, or perhaps even ignite it for the first time. But it's also a bit of a variant scam. So I assumed, but I have not been able to confirm this. So for DC All In, you were able to do retailer exclusive variant covers that are solicited by the retailers themselves, but you have to order a certain amount of the A cover to get there. And they lowered it from 3,000 down to 1,000. And that's why the all-in sales were a lot bigger than you would have expected. And I assumed they might have done this with Batman 158, but there is actually no data out there confirming or denying that. So maybe they didn't do it, or maybe that's just their new standard operating procedure. You only have to order 1,000 covers to get a retailer exclusive variant rather than 3,000, which was the before standard. Now let's get into these big news and some of the other variant scams that absolutely are happening. DC Comics announced they have had over 400,000 orders from comic book stores for Batman 158, the first issue of the much anticipated sequel to Batman Hush. They bleated congratulations to Jeff Loeb, Jim Lee, and our amazing variant cover artists for more than 400,000 copies ordered of Batman 158, Chapter 1 of Hush 2, before adding DC thanks comic retailers for their tremendous response, and fans can pick up this hotly anticipated issue starting on March 26th. And we will definitely be covering that issue right here on Thinking Critical YouTube. In fact, Doc and I are absolutely going to review that one. It's called Worst of the Week, but sometimes we record reviews of things that we're just really interested in. Jim Lee coming back as a full-time artist, at least for 6 issues, is a big deal in our opinion. And Jim Lee is one of Doc's 5 favorite comic book artists of all time. So we're going to review that one. We'll definitely be covering it here. I have talked to a person that's seen at least like a redacted version of the final. It's like the final, but it says it's, it could change. And it sounds like the art from Jim Lee is absolutely spectacular. In fact, the person told me specifically that Jim Lee basically carries the book because the art is that good, which is very much in line with the original Hush story, which I know a lot of people love it. I like it. I think it's probably the best illustrated Batman story of all times, but I don't think it's the best Batman story of all times because I think the story itself is very average. Maybe that's going to happen here. But the big thing is people are excited. 400,000 orders. That's people going into their local comic book shops, getting covers and all that kind of stuff, and getting in there and maybe discovering a Green Lantern series, or maybe discovering Aliens versus Avengers, or maybe discovering, Geiger, or Transformers, or G.I. Joe, or some of the other awesome comic books that are out there that people should be reading, including Space Ghost and Flash Gordon, which are absolutely badass. Now let's talk about some of these variant scams. These have been going on for a while, but Batman 158 is being heavily leveraged by variants. DC have gone all in on this, however, with ratio variants to encourage comic book stores to order more and more copies. 1 in 25 variants, 1 in 50 variants, 1 in 100 variants, 1 in 250 variants, 2 signed 1 in 608 variants, and at the top of the range, a 1 in 1,000 variant for comic stores who order 1,000 copies of Batman 158 signed by both Jim Lee and Jeff Loeb. And the ratio variant thing, if you're not completely aware of it, is pretty easy to explain. A 1 in 25 is if you ordered 25 copies, you get this specific ratio variant. And if you order 100 copies, you get 4 of them. You get another variant for every time you eclipse that thing. So if you did 1,000 copies because you wanted a retailer exclusive, you would end up with 40? Something like that. 40 of these 1 in 25s, 1 in 50 is the same, 1 in 100, 250. They have a couple of signed 608s. Obviously, Hush started in issue 608 of Batman, kind of homaging that, and then 1 in 1,000. This is where they lost a lot of people. Actually, originally, it wasn't DC that did that. It was actually Marvel that was doing the 1 in 1,000 variants, a lot of times with original Jim Lee art from when he was on X-Men. And Like the first week they would cost like $900 to maybe $1,100, like coming out the gate. None of them are worth anything like that anymore. They're worth more like $300 now, even though they're exceptionally rare. And normally like a 1 in 25 is going to cost you $25. A 1 in 50 is going to cost you $50 and stuff like that. But they have definitely incentivized retailers to up their orders and get their hands on some of these more rare exclusive ratio variants that are certainly going to bring in a lot of collectors. Me personally, I don't get all this stuff. I do not have a collector's mentality when it comes to comic books. I don't care if I got the A cover, the B cover, the Z cover, or the whatever cover, as long as the story is good. I'm cool with it, but I'm strictly a comic book reader. I'm not really a comic book collector, so not exactly my scene. But Doc certainly was a comic book collector. In fact, he was an X-Men completionist, and I think it was X-Men Gold #1 with a 1 in 1,000 Jim Lee variant that actually convinced Doc he didn't want to be an X-Men completionist anymore because it was so damn expensive trying to keep your collection complete every single month. And I guess that was a bridge too far. But we are going to have 1 in 1,000s for this one. I imagine there's a lot of retailer exclusive variant covers. And if the range is 3,000 on that, they'll be getting 3 of those per shop. And that's only if you did 1 cover. If you wanted 4 covers, obviously you had to order like 1,200 issues and you would get 12 of them. So there probably should be a good amount of those 1 in 1,000s out there. I don't think there'll be a great investment, but I am not here to help you out with your comic book investing portfolio. I guess we all have to make that decision. But there's more with the variants games. DC Comics is letting comic book stores sell Batman 158, the first chapter of Batman Hush 2, early from 6:08 p.m. local time on 25 March, the day before it's due to go on sale. Additionally, retailers who order at least one 25-count bundle of Batman 159 ash cans qualify to order the Batman 158 Launch Party glow-in-the-dark variant cover. This glow-in-the-dark variant cover appears to be a version of the Batman symbol, but reveals a swarm of glowing bats in the dark. Qualifying retailers can order the Batman 158 Launch Party glow-in-the-dark variant cover as an open-to-order variant. And what I think that means is once you've hit the quota, like the 1 in 25 thing of the ash cans, you can order as many copies as you want, as long as you pay for them or whatever. I think the idea to let it go on sale the day before early is really smart because they are going to absolutely own the comic book shop that day. There's no Marvel comic books that are going to be on sale that are new. There won't even be any other DC books, but you'll be going in there to get Batman. And hopefully, if you're a hardcore, comic book fan, and maybe you want some of these glow-in-the-dark retail covers or some of these more exclusive, higher ratio variants, and you have to be in there first, you get in there, and maybe you see a couple things. You have to come back the next day to get your X-Men or whatever, and maybe you're able to pick up a little bit more product. So I applaud DC for going out there and doing something to bring attention to local comic book shops on a day besides Wednesday. I thought it was great when they had their own new release day being Tuesday. It sounds like some other retailers were in agreement with me, but obviously DC ended up moving back to Wednesday. But I think it's a cool thing. I think it's awesome to get people in on days that they're not used to for something big like Jim Lee returning to Batman. As far as glow-in-the-dark, party covers, I mean, maybe my kids would like it, but at that point, they're not really for kids. You know what I mean? Because they're probably too expensive and you're having to hit thresholds and you're probably having to throw a little extra money on that bad boy just to sell it and stuff like that. Are adults interested in glow-in-the-dark comic book covers? Certainly collectors are. And there's going to be a lot of covers that they're going to need to collect if they want to be a Batman completionist for Batman 158 going on there. There's one last thing that they're doing. Additionally, DC Comics is to publish a giant-sized version of Batman 158 by Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee at artboard size. Batman 158 giant-size special edition is a special widescreen edition of the issue measuring 11 by 17 at the size that it was created. Batman 158 giant-size special edition arrives with a standard cover price of $15 and a foil edition for $20. So when I hear giant size, I'm expecting it to be a big comic book like giant size X-Men or like giant size Avengers and stuff like that. This will not be that. It's going to be giant size because it's going to be big, like a magazine, basically with the original artboard size of it. So it'll be much, much larger and essentially 3 times the cover price for the much bigger kind of collectible version of it. I'm fine with that. That's cool. You won't be able to get it graded and thrown into little plastic time capsule thing that people like to do with their comic books. because it would be far too big. Foil edition, $20. Might as well throw the extra $5 in there and get that foil edition. But, you know, hey, it's cool that they're trying different formats and different things to maybe get some eyes on this. But in all reality, they're just selling the same comic book to the same person multiple times. Obviously, all these different ratio variant covers with special artists, and they're all good artists. You know, in this special edition, that's a different formatted size, and you can get it with the foil cover and all that stuff. And hey, don't you want that glow-in-the-dark cover? So obviously, 400,000 sales is great. I'm glad the orders are high. I wonder if it sells out. I don't think that it will. I think a lot of retailers are out there probably doing retailer-exclusive covers. A lot of them probably doing multiple, so they're going to have lots of copies. So maybe your normal mom-and-pop comic book shop might run out of all the copies that they have, but I do think you'll be able to get them as long as you're aware of who's doing a lot of the retail-exclusive covers, because they're going to have lots and lots of those A covers because they got to order in the thousands just for the ability to do something like that. But there you go. It's good that the numbers are high, but it's also a bit of a variant scam, so there's nothing wrong with being honest and giving DC their flowers and their kudos for doing a good job. They certainly have done a good job marketing this book. Jim Lee brings that cachet, that interest in a Batman 158, which I think is absolutely integral to the success of the book. Hopefully it works out with Matt Fraction coming in for a new #1 later on in the year with new, more interested eyes on Batman. Maybe people coming back because Jim Lee was there. Maybe I'll just keep it on the pull list or whatever. But they're doing business as usual. They're much more like Marvel's business strategies from like 5 or 6 years ago that DC weren't doing at all, and they're very heavily invested and leveraged on that. We saw it with Absolute Universe. We certainly have seen it with All In and all that stuff. So there you go, buyer beware. If you're hoping to get all those covers, it's going to cost you a lot of money because there's a 1 in 1,000 out there. There's 2 different 1 in 608s. We got 1 in 250s, 1 in 100s. And there's even going to be some glow-in-the-dark and special editions that are just more expensive in a different format. If you appreciate all the comic book news and opinions and reviews that you get here on Think Critical YouTube, and you'd like to support that mission to throw some spotlights on comic books, a little bit of honesty, because you can't get that many places, even on YouTube these days, the best place to do that is Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. There's a button right here. You can go right there. You're going to be part of the family. You get a superhero name. You get to support the mission, help get the lights on, the videos flowing, and hopefully help make comic books great again.